Hi folks, this is Dr. DiBiase, and in this video I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the grading policy for the course and spend a little bit more time explaining the rationale for why we're going to approach grading in this course the way that we do. So let's start by this. In most courses that you've probably taken to this point, you have received a grade based on, for example, if you were taking an exam, right, you would get a grade based on the degree to which the answers on that exam were correct, right? Or if you were writing a paper for a course, your grade would likely be tied to the degree to which the writing you produced matched up with requirements that might be set forward in a grading policy or a rubric, right, that you could use to guide the decisions that you were making as you put that work together. And that might include things like, focus or organization or grammar and mechanics, etc., etc., etc. And based on how well you met that rubric or the requirements of that rubric, you'd be assigned either an A or a B or a C, or maybe your teachers, had point values for things, whatever, right? In this course, we're taking a different approach. So we're doing what's called a contract grading model, right? And this is a labor-based contract grading model. And so I want to be very clear about this, right? The grade that you receive for the course is tied to the amount of labor or the amount of work that you perform in service to the course. And rather than the degree to which the things that you produce for the course, right? So your final projects, your podcasts, etc., meet some sort of vision of what the ideal form of that thing would be. And why are we doing it this way? Well, I'm going to kind of walk us through sort of the description in the syllabus, but I'll elaborate as we kind of go along. So if we assume that the goal of the course is to learn, right? The goal of any college course is to sort of learn and push our thinking and our reading and writing and learning and all those other kinds of skills. Then worrying about the grade is a problem if worrying about that grade gets in the way of those kinds of things. Um, and one of the problems here is that if we're focusing just on the grade, right, then it's easy to sort of fall into a number of traps, right? Whether that trap is I'm only going to do the kinds of stuff that I think will guarantee a certain grade, right? So I'm only going to write about this topic because I think this topic will get me a better grade. Or I have a creative idea for a paper, but I'm not going to do anything with it because I'm afraid that the professor won't like it, and so it would impact my grade negatively. Um, and so a traditional grading model, particularly for a first year kind of writing class, I think is kind of a poor fit. Because, again, for one of the key reasons is that it emphasizes the grade over the learning, right? So to get to sort of the reasons why we're using this approach, I think the first one for me, as I note here, is that um, learning works better when you can take some risks and you can experiment, right? When you can figure out what works and what doesn't, both for a particular kind of text, but also for yourself as a learner, as a writer, as a doer, right? And one of the key concepts that we're going to talk about this semester is this idea of metacognition and meta-awareness, this idea of thinking about your own thinking, trying to understand why you've made the decisions that you've made and why you didn't go down other roads. What were the outcomes based on the decisions that you made? What might have happened if you had done things differently? And it's hard to do that, I think, if you don't have the freedom to sort of play around with ideas. Um, and I think it's important to note here that sometimes what this will mean is that the thing that you produce might not be objectively very good, right? It could be a real disaster. Um, but that's okay because that's how you learn, right? You learn more from kind of playing around with something and breaking it, right? And figuring out why it broke or how the pieces fit together, than when you just do the same thing you've always done and have gotten a grade as a result. Um, so this will hopefully get you to step out of your comfort zone a little bit, both in terms of the choices that you make on your projects, but also because a lot of the things I'm going to ask you to do are going to require you to step outside of your comfort zone, right? You're doing a lot of group work this semester, and I know that has made people uncomfortable in the past because maybe you've had a bad experience with group work or you're worried that the partners in one's group might negatively impact your grade. Well, this system sort of deals with that in a pretty elegant way. You're going to be making podcasts, which is something that you might not have done before and you might not feel comfortable doing, but that's okay because um, you don't have to worry about being perfect in order to get a good grade. The major project for the course, where you're going to make an audio or visual map, is probably something you haven't done before, and that's okay because even if the final product isn't a perfectly polished thing that we could put on the front page of the Fairfield University website, you'll still have learned, and that's the important thing, right? So that's part of it, right? Uh, Next, as I note here, right, the best way to get good at something is to do it a lot. And so this course is going to require you to do a lot of things, right? You're going to be doing a lot of writing. You're going to be doing a lot of reading. You're going to be doing a lot of thinking. You're going to be doing a lot of communicating, both with myself as the professor, but with the members of your group as well. And so by, I think you're going to learn more by putting in effort, right? You're going to learn more by just doing the work than you will by fixating on what do you have to do in a specific project to earn a specific kind of grade. Um, I don't think that's especially valuable. I don't think it leads you to learn how to do things better or differently or explore what you're capable of. And I note here, a couple of examples of where, the more you do something, the better you get at it, right? Whether it's home repair or singing or a sport, right? It's through the act of doing the thing over and over again and receiving guidance on that process that you begin to grow. And this is also worth noting, right? In most things other than school, you're not given like a grade, right? You're not given a letter grade or a numerical grade on your performance, right? It's just, did it work or did it not work? And so what I'm going to do is give you feedback throughout the semester that will help you sort of push yourself and improve your writing, improve your reading, improve your thinking, improve your learning. Um, but that's not going to be tied to any specific numerical value. Third, and I want to spend some more time on this because we didn't touch on it so much in our conversations last week, but I think this is really important. So throughout this class, we're going to sort of talk about what does it mean to situate ideas about writing and reading and literacy in a bigger social context. And one of the things that we're going to discuss is that the idea of there being sort of one singular correct kind of English is a really problematic idea, right? So yes, there is kind of a quote unquote standard that we typically apply in a school setting or a work setting, but it's an arbitrary standard, right? It's not, there's nothing objectively better or worse about that standard than any other variety of English. And as I've mentioned to a few of you, right, for example, when I was at another institution, I ran a small, department that had faculty members from Australia, India, and Pakistan, right? And these all are countries that have a variety of English. Um, that are distinct from American English, and American English is distinct from British English, but they're all valid forms of English. And we can even talk about, and we are going to talk about, how even within the United States, there are many varieties of English that are internally consistent and that work for the communities that make use of them, but that might differ from the standard that is applied in a school setting. And so one of the problems with a more traditional grading model is that it tends to provide advantages to students based on factors that are really outside of their control, right? And I can speak to my own, I'm happy to speak to my own experience here. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household where my parents had, sufficient money to pay for tutors if I needed tutors, to send me to a private school, if they weren't happy with the school district that we were living in. The English, right, the variety of English or the dialect of English that we spoke in the home very closely mirrored the kinds of Englishes that were expected in school. And so it didn't require a whole lot of work on my part to sort of transition into that mode. But that's not the case for everyone. And so depending on one's economic background, racial background, ethnic background, language background, right, family history, there are a whole lot of factors that are beyond our control that have an impact on the way in which we perform when working in sort of quote unquote school varieties of English. And in many ways, traditional kinds of grading create an unfair advantage based on someone's background that has very little to do with their ability as a thinker or their mastery of a particular kind of material. They just sort of start with kind of a leg up, right? And that's not to say that those individuals aren't working hard or aren't very intelligent, but they are coming in with sort of an unnatural advantage based on a whole host of things that we're going to be talking about when we talk more about the concepts of literacy and discourse in a couple of weeks. And so one thing that this grading system does is sort of level the playing field a little bit. No one's at a disadvantage. If you have always been a strong writer, you've always done well in your English classes or your writing classes, you have every opportunity to get an A in this course. Um, but on the flip side, if you are someone who comes from a background where you have, for any variety of reasons, have struggled as a writer or have struggled with English or have been told that you're not a particularly good writer, well, guess what? You also have every opportunity to earn an A in this course. Because regardless of the backgrounds that we're coming from, we all have the ability to do the work. And what learning looks like for each of us might vary from student to student, but I guarantee that by putting in the work and by taking the feedback that you receive from myself and others seriously, you will absolutely improve across a range of categories across this semester. And that's really the point of being in college, not to just earn an A. So then let's talk about what labor means if we're talking about a labor-based contract grading system, right? So really that's the amount of time you're spending on your task. And so if we think about like the labor of reading an essay, right? Well, that's the time you spent reading, taking notes, asking questions, posting on the discussion board, etc. Um, and it is important here to note that you need to make sure that you're putting in the necessary work, not just to complete a task, but to really understand it, right? So I know here, if you happen to be a fast reader, just because you can read something in 10 minutes doesn't mean you should only allot 10 minutes to that task, right? You want to make sure that you're really using your time to dig into the work that you're doing. Um, Similarly, right, you might have an essay that is of a certain length, and you might be able to kind of crank that out really quickly. But that's not really in the spirit of doing the work of the class, right? Because I'm going to ask you to do things like plan and organize and revise and provide feedback and get feedback and revise again. Um, and so part of this is on the honor system, right? Part of this is I expect you to be doing a certain amount of work each week. I'm going to trust you unless you demonstrate otherwise. I'm going to trust that unless you demonstrate otherwise, that you are putting in that work. If I see you submitting work that I feel like is not indicative of the amount of time and energy that you should be putting into an assignment, then we'll have a conversation and kind of get back on track. But for the most part, if you're turning in your work on time and the work that you're submitting meets sort of the requirements of the assignment, then I'm going to assume that you've put in a good faith effort. And if I feel like you're not, then we'll talk more about that. There are other kinds of labor for the course too, right? Our weekly meetings are a form of labor. Making time to meet with me in office hours is a form of labor. Conducting research outside of the class or finding additional materials that will support the kinds of work that you're doing are kinds of labor. So you'll be doing lots of different kinds of work throughout the semester. So what does this mean in practical terms, right? So you're going to have a lot of work that you're going to be doing. I have to trust that you're doing the work, right? And as I note here, I expect that this will probably take you about, to earn a B, I'm thinking about 6 to 8 hours of work per week. How you divide up that work is up to you. The module maps will give you some guidance in terms of the required stuff that you need to be doing. But beyond that, right, it'll be up to you to determine, maybe you put some extra time into a reading, some writing, meetings, research, office hours, even maybe meeting with a tutor at the Fairfield University Writing Center. And so this is really important. I can't directly observe how much work you're putting into the course, right? I can't be over your shoulders, with a timer, right? So I am going to assume that you are making a good faith effort to put in about 6 to 8 hours of work each week until you give me reason to think otherwise, right? So either you're submitting assignments late, not turning stuff in, or turning in work that just does not feel like it demonstrates the required level of effort based on the course. So here's the short form of what this contract is going to look like. And we've talked a little bit about this in our meetings. As long as you turn in the work on time, as long as the work meets the basic requirements of the assignment, right, in terms of the content covered, the length, and all the other requirements that I'll make clear in each specific assignment, and as long as all the work is submitted and demonstrates a level of effort and care, and that's what I mean by good faith effort, right? It's clear that you've put in effort and you've taken care to do your best. You get a grade of a B for the course, right? And that applies to everyone in the class. If you want to earn a higher grade, you will need to complete some additional labor opportunities. Now, I haven't outlined them yet in the syllabus because they're not going to come into play until about week 4. But once I have them ready to go and once they become available, I'll be making another video talking us through them, and I'll post them on the course Blackboard site. But to give you some examples, some weeks I'm going to ask you to do peer review with a partner in your group. One of the extra labor options might involve not only providing peer feedback to that specific member of your group, but providing feedback to all of the members of your group. So instead of just providing one set of peer responses, you're providing 3 or 4 sets of peer responses, depending on the context. You'll also have opportunities to do sort of reflective assignments collaboratively, where you spend some time developing materials that have you and a partner or partners reflect upon your experience of having done one of the major projects. So you can begin doing the kind of reflection that they talk about in chapter 2 of the textbook. In terms of grades lower than a B, the only major way that you can achieve a grade lower than a B is by turning in work late or by not turning in work at all. Those are sort of the primary ways in which your grade will be negatively impacted. So the grid below lets you know how many allowances that you have for missed or late assignments. So if you want to earn a B in the class, you can have up to 3 assignments that are turned in within 48 hours of the deadline, and up to 1 assignment turned in past 48 hours beyond the deadline. But you may not have any assignments that are straight up missing. Every assignment for the course must be submitted, barring some sort of extraordinary circumstance that we can discuss. And then below are the guidelines for a C and for a D. Now, let's say you are in that C area because you've missed some assignments or they're very late. You can earn your grade back up by completing those additional labor options that we talked about before. So even if things sort of go off the rails at the start of the semester, you'll still have time to move your grade up by the end of the course. Also note one clear thing here, 2 things actually. If there are significant issues that are preventing you from getting your work in a timely manner, please reach out to me so that we can talk about some alternative accommodations. And then secondly, all the assignments are weighted evenly. So a late quiz counts just as much as a late major assignment. So this means that you have to take every assignment seriously and make sure that those pieces of work are getting submitted on time. If you have any further questions about the grading policy, I'm happy to discuss these with you one-on-one. So just reach out to me via email and we'll set up a time to talk it through. Take care.